The first time Elia's ward saw the Aurelian queen, he understood why most species chose to kneel before they even spoke. She stood on a raised platform of pale stone that looked like it had been carved from moonlight. The hall around her was huge, wider than any human senate chamber he had ever seen, and it rose in layers like a cliff made of seats and shadows. Above, long ribbons of light flowed through the air like slow rivers, changing color with soft, living motion. The Aurelian nobles sat in silence, their bodies tall and fine-boned, their faces masked with thin plates of silver and crystal. Their eyes, the few he could see clearly, followed Elia's as if he were a small animal brought into a glass cage. Elias kept his shoulders straight and his hands relaxed at his sides. He had trained for this moment for months, but training could not copy the feeling of thousands of alien minds focusing on him at once. He reminded himself of the one thing Captain Rios had said right before the shuttle door opened. "Don't try to impress them," she had told him. "Don't try to be what they expect. Just be human." That sounded simple until you were standing in a room built to make you feel small. He walked forward along the long path that cut through the center of the hall. The floor beneath him was smooth and cold, and it reflected his boots like shallow water. He could hear the quiet sound of his own steps. No one else moved. No one else breathed loudly. Even the air felt controlled. At the end of the path, a line of Aurelian guards waited. Their armor was black and sharp, like folded obsidian. Their weapons were not rifles or blades, but something stranger, long rods that carried a faint hum like a distant storm trapped inside metal. One guard raised a hand. Elias stopped. A translator unit at his collar clicked softly. A clear voice, human in tone but not human in rhythm, spoke from a hidden speaker. "Elias, ward of Terra, you enter the court of Queen Salith, first flame of Aurum, keeper of the conquered, voice of the star laws. Your body is unarmed. Your mind will be tested." Elias swallowed. He had expected threats and politics. He had not expected that last line to sound so calm. He nodded once. "I understand." The guard stepped aside, and Elias walked the final few paces until he stood at a marked circle on the floor. The circle was thin and golden, set into the stone like a boundary made from light. He stopped inside it. The circle pulsed once like it had noticed him. High above, Queen Salith looked down. She was taller than any Aurelian he had met. The species was already tall compared to humans, but she seemed made from a different rule. Her posture was perfect without looking stiff. Her skin, where it was not covered by royal armor, had the soft shine of pearl. Her crown was not a crown in the human sense. It was a ring of floating shards, each piece turning slowly in the air around her head, never touching her hair. Her eyes were the most unsettling part. They were not one color but many, like a deep pool reflecting stars. He could not tell where her gaze ended and where the hall began. For a moment, Elias felt sure that she could see every mistake he had ever made. Then she spoke, and her voice filled the chamber without effort. "Human consort," she said. The words were translated instantly, but the original sound still struck him. It was musical, almost gentle, but it carried a weight that pressed against his chest. He forced himself to meet her gaze. "I am Elias' ward," he replied. He kept his voice steady. "Envoy of Earth. I am here by agreement, not by conquest." A ripple moved through the nobles. It was not laughter. It was something colder, like a shared thought. Queen Salith tilted her head slightly. "Agreement is a word used by those who fear to say need." Elias took a careful breath. "Then we need each other," he said. "Earth needs peace. The conquered needs a steady border. We both need time." Silence settled again, thicker than before. The queen's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in careful attention. "You speak without ornament," she said. "I'm not good at ornament," Elias answered. "I'm better at meaning." Another quiet ripple. The nobles shifted again. He could feel their judgment. They expected him to flatter her, to beg, to perform. Queen Salith raised one hand. The floating shards of her crown slowed, as if obeying her mood. "Then we will test your meaning," she said. "This is the trial of worth. It is older than your species' written history. It will show what you truly are." Elias knew the trial was coming. Earth's diplomats had warned him, but no one had been able to describe what it was, only that it was not violence but not harmless. Even the translation of the word trial was uncertain. It could also mean unfolding or uncovering. A door opened on the far side of the hall. Two attendants entered, moving with smooth steps. They carried a thin, dark band of material like a collar but wider, lined with faint blue symbols. The attendants stopped at the edge of the golden circle. The translator spoke again. This is the mirror coil. It does not injure flesh. It reads what is hidden and makes it visible. Elias looked at the coil. His skin tightened. Visible to who? To the court, the translator replied, calm as stone. Elias felt the urge to step back. Not because of fear of pain, but because of something deeper, the fear of being seen too clearly, without control, without privacy. Humans built walls around their thoughts for a reason. He looked up at the queen. "Do I have a choice?" he asked. Queen Salith's expression did not change. "You are free to refuse," she said, "and the conquered is free to decide what refusal means." That was not a threat. It was simply the truth, spoken without softness. Elias let out a slow breath. He thought of Earth's ships waiting at the edge of conquered space, of the fragile ceasefires with pirate clans, of colonies that had only survived by luck and stubbornness. He thought of his mother back on Mars, sending him a message that ended with, "Just come home alive." He stepped forward. "Put it on," he said. The attendants moved. Their hands were cool as they lifted the coil and placed it around his neck and upper chest. The material adjusted itself, tightening until it fit snugly but not painfully. The symbols along its surface flickered. Elias felt a quick pressure behind his eyes, like the moment before tears form. The golden circle brightened. The air changed. It felt thinner, sharper, like the hall had become a blade. The nobles leaned forward slightly. Even the guards seemed more alert. Queen Salith stood. When she moved, the room seemed to move with her. She walked down the steps of her platform, slow and controlled, until she stood at the edge of the golden circle across from Elias. She did not enter it. She simply watched from the boundary. "You will be shown 3 doors," she said. "They are not physical doors. They are choices made visible. You will speak what you see, and you will choose." Elias' throat went dry. "What happens if I choose wrong?" The queen's gaze held him. "Then you will learn what you are," she said. The circle flared. The hall around him blurred. Elias blinked, but the blur did not go away. It was not that his eyes had failed. It was that the world had shifted. The nobles and guards became distant shapes, like painted figures behind glass. The lights above dimmed into soft haze. In front of Elias, the air thickened and formed a doorway. It was tall and simple, made of dark stone. On the doorway was a symbol. Even without knowing the language, Elias understood its meaning, the way you understand a warning sign by instinct. Power. A second doorway formed beside it, made of pale metal, clean and bright. Duty. A third doorway formed last. It looked almost ordinary, made of warm wood with marks like human hands had touched it many times. Connection. Elias stared at them. The coil around his neck hummed, and with the hum came images, faint at first, then clearer. Behind the first door, he saw himself standing on a stage back on Earth, praised as the man who tamed the aliens. He saw medals. He saw crowds. He saw his name carved into metal. He saw power that came from others believing in him. Behind the second door, he saw endless meetings, treaties, long nights of work, a life spent inside rules. He saw himself aging quietly, becoming a tool that never stopped being used. He saw respect without warmth. Behind the third door, he saw something more dangerous because it was softer. He saw friendships with beings who were not human. He saw shared laughter in a place where laughter was rare. He saw himself not as a symbol, but as a person among other persons. He saw moments that could be lost, broken, misunderstood. Elias felt his chest tighten. He realized what the test was trying to do. It was offering him different kinds of safety. The first door offered safety through control. The second offered safety through obedience. The third offered no safety at all, only meaning. He heard Queen Salith's voice, distant but clear. "Speak what you see." Elias swallowed. His instinct screamed at him to choose the door that would make the court approve of him, but he had no idea which one that was. The Aurelians did not think like humans. They might respect power. They might respect duty. They might despise connection as weakness, or they might be testing something else entirely. He looked at the queen. Her face remained still, but her eyes held attention, like someone listening for a sound they were afraid to hear. Elias understood then that she was not simply watching him. She was waiting. He spoke carefully. "The first door shows me being celebrated," he said. "It's power, fame, control." The nobles shifted, a low murmur passing like wind. "The second door shows duty," Elias continued. "A life spent serving agreements, even if it empties me." The murmur shifted again. "And the third door," he looked at the warm wooden door. "The third door shows connection, friendship, trust, the kind that can hurt you." Queen Salith's gaze sharpened. "Which do you choose?" Elias felt the coil hum louder, as if it wanted an answer that matched the court's expectation. It wanted a clean, simple decision. His mind raced. If he chose power, Earth might gain influence, but he might become a weapon pointed at others. If he chose duty, he might become trapped, a human shaped into Aurelian law. If he chose connection, he might lose everything if it was seen as weakness. But he might also gain something that could change both sides. He remembered Captain Rios's words, "Be human." Humans were messy. Humans made bonds even when it was risky. Humans survived because they were stubborn enough to care. He stepped toward the third door. "I choose connection," he said. The hall seemed to inhale. The wooden door opened. Light spilled out, not bright and blinding, but warm and steady. Elias felt his body relax for the first time since entering the hall. He saw himself sitting across from Queen Salith, not as a ruler and a consort, but as two beings sharing silence. He saw the queen without her crown, her shoulders slightly bowed, her expression tired. He saw her speaking without an audience, her voice softer. He saw her pain not as drama, but as something real. Then the image shifted. He saw something else, the queen alone in a room that looked like it had no doors, a room filled with trophies and ancient texts and cold beauty. She stood at the center, surrounded by symbols of greatness, yet her posture was the posture of someone carrying a weight that never came off. Elias' throat tightened. He felt a sharp sting behind his eyes again, not from the coil, but from empathy he could not stop. The vision faded. The hall returned. The nobles stared. The guards did not move. The air was thick with quiet shock. Queen Salith's face remained controlled, but her eyes had changed. They looked less like stars now and more like something alive, something that could break. "The first door was the easy lie," she said softly, and the translator carried it to Elias' ear. "The second door was the noble cage. The third door is the dangerous truth." Elias stood still. The coil still hummed, but weaker now, like it had lost confidence. Queen Salith stepped forward, and for the first time she entered the golden circle. The nobles reacted instantly. Some leaned back as if the act itself was shocking. The guards tensed. It was clear that their queen crossing that boundary was not part of normal ritual. Queen Salith stopped one step away from Elias, close enough that he could see fine details, faint lines near her eyes, marks that looked like stress rather than age, a slight tremor in the floating shards of her crown. "You chose connection," she said, quieter now. "Why?" Elias could have lied. He could have said something about diplomacy or strategy. He could have said what a court wanted to hear. But he had already stepped into truth. He knew somehow that stepping out now would be worse than failing. "Because power without people is empty," he said, "and duty without care becomes cruelty. I don't want Earth to win by becoming cold. I don't want you to keep ruling alone until you forget what it feels like to be understood." The silence that followed was deeper than before. It did not feel like judgment. It felt like the room itself was listening. Queen Salith's gaze held his. For a moment, her mask of control slipped. Not enough for the court to accuse her of weakness, but enough for Elias to see it. Loneliness. Not the simple loneliness of missing a friend, but the kind that comes from being placed above everyone until no one dares to reach you. Elias understood then that the ritual had never been meant to expose him for the court's entertainment. It had been designed to confirm something the queen already believed, that no one could truly stand beside her. And now, because of a human who refused to play the expected role, that belief was cracking. Queen Salith lifted one hand and touched the mirror coil at his chest. The attendants and guards flinched, but she did not care. With a soft motion, she deactivated it. The symbols dimmed. The hum stopped. Elias felt the pressure behind his eyes fade. She lowered her hand. "You are not what they predicted," she said. Elias' mouth was dry, but he managed a small, careful smile. "Neither are you," he replied. A few nobles made sharp sounds, maybe disapproval, maybe alarm. A guard took one step forward, then froze when the queen glanced back. Queen Salith turned to face the hall. Her voice rose again, becoming royal, controlled, like a flame returning to its shaped torch. "The trial of worth is complete," she announced. "The human has chosen the third path. He has spoken what he sees without fear. He has passed." The court did not cheer. Aurelians did not show joy like that. But the hall trembled with something like disbelief, as if an old story had just been rewritten and no one knew what came next. Queen Salith looked back at Elias one last time, and in her eyes he saw a message that was not meant for anyone else. This was only the first test, and somehow the greatest truth he had seen in the vision was not about the doors. It was about her. About a ruler who wore perfection like armor, not because she loved power, but because she was terrified of what would happen if anyone saw her as real. Elias stood inside the fading golden circle and understood that his role as consort would not be a simple political symbol. It would be a mirror, and the queen, despite all her titles, had just shown him that she was brave enough to step into it. The attendants approached to remove the coil, but Queen Salith lifted her hand again, stopping them. "No," she said. "Leave it for now." The attendants bowed and withdrew, confused but obedient. Elias looked at her, surprised. Queen Salith's voice dropped low, too quiet for the translator to carry far. "I have tested many," she said. "They all chose the first or second door. They desired control or they accepted the cage. None chose the dangerous truth." Elias felt the weight of the moment settle on him. "Maybe they were afraid," he said. "Everyone is afraid," she replied. Her gaze held his, steady and sharp. "Human," she said, and for the first time the word did not sound like a label. It sounded like a question. "Are you afraid?" Elias thought of Earth, of politics, of alien courts, of the unknown future. He thought of the vision of the queen alone in a room with no doors. He answered honestly. "Yes," he said, "but I'm still here." For a heartbeat, the queen's expression softened, just enough. Then she turned and walked back toward her platform, her crown shards spinning again, faster now, like thoughts she could not fully control. Elias watched her go, and he knew something important had just happened. Not a treaty, not a victory, a crack in an empire's oldest belief. And in that crack, a human had stepped, carrying nothing but simple truth, the stubborn human habit of caring, and the quiet refusal to let power erase the person underneath. When the guards escorted him out of the hall, the noble's eyes followed him like cold moons. But Elias did not feel small anymore. He felt the heavy, strange beginning of something that could change the conquered and earth alike. And somewhere behind him, on a throne made of light and silence, a queen who had never allowed herself to be seen was now forced to face a new, frightening possibility. That she might not have to be alone. Elias did not sleep after the trial. The room given to him was large and quiet, with walls that shifted color slowly, like the inside of a living shell. Aurelian architecture did not believe in sharp corners. Everything curved, flowed, and wrapped around itself. The bed was soft but unfamiliar, adjusting to his weight in ways that made it hard to relax. The air smelled clean, almost sweet and too calm. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling as faint lights drifted across it like distant stars. His mind kept returning to Queen Salith's eyes when she stepped into the golden circle. Not anger, not pride, loneliness. That single truth had changed everything. Outside his chamber, guards stood at a respectful distance. They were not there to protect him, Elias knew. They were there to make sure he did not leave without permission. The title of consort came with honor, but also with invisible chains. When sleep finally came, it was shallow and broken. He dreamed of doors that kept opening into larger rooms with no exits. In every room, the queen stood alone, her crown floating above her head like a weight she could never set down. Each time Elias tried to speak, the air thickened until no sound came out. He woke before the rest cycle ended. A soft tone sounded in the room, followed by the calm voice of the translator system. "Elias Ward, the queen has requested your presence." No command, no threat. A request. That alone told him something had shifted. He rose, washed quickly, and dressed in the simple formal clothing Earth had provided. It looked plain compared to Aurelian designs, but he had learned that humans standing plainly often unsettled alien courts more than fine decoration ever could. The doors opened without sound. Two attendants waited, their expressions unreadable behind thin facial plates. They guided him through corridors that twisted like slow rivers, past windows that looked out into space. Massive structures floated beyond the palace, glowing softly, connected by streams of light that were ships moving faster than his eyes could track. The conquered was beautiful in a distant, controlled way. Nothing looked accidental. Nothing looked allowed to grow wild. They reached a chamber unlike the grand hall of the trial. This room was smaller, circular, and almost bare. There were no nobles, no guards inside, just a low table and two seats shaped to fit different bodies. Queen Salith stood near one of the windows, her back turned. Her crown was gone. For a moment, Elias almost did not recognize her. Without the floating shards, she looked lighter. Still powerful, still unmistakably royal in posture, but less like a symbol and more like a person. Her shoulders were slightly slumped, as if she had allowed herself to relax for the first time in centuries. The attendants withdrew and the doors sealed. Queen Salith did not turn right away. "You saw something during the trial," she said. Elias hesitated. "I saw many things." She turned then, slowly. Her eyes were sharp but tired. "You saw me," she said. It was not a question. Elias chose his words carefully. "I saw a ruler carrying more weight than anyone should carry alone." The queen studied him for a long moment. The silence felt different here. It was not heavy with judgment, but with caution like thin ice. "The mirror coil is designed to expose ambition," she said. "Fear, desire for control, it has never shown that." She gestured vaguely, as if referring to the image he had seen. Elias nodded. "Because that wasn't my fear," he said. "It was yours." For an instant, Elias thought he had gone too far. The air seemed to tighten. The room dimmed slightly, responding to the queen's emotional state. He braced himself for anger, for dismissal, for punishment. Instead, Queen Salith exhaled slowly. "Yes," she said, one word, quiet, honest. She moved to the table and sat. The chair adjusted to her form. After a brief pause, she gestured to the opposite seat. "Sit," she said, again not a command, an invitation. Elias sat. Up close, he noticed small details he had missed before. Fine marks on her hands, not scars, but signs of strain. Slight tremors she did not bother to hide. Her eyes, though luminous, carried shadows beneath them. "You are wondering why you are still alive," she said calmly. Elias blinked. "I wasn't going to say it that way," he admitted. "But yes." The corner of her mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile. "Many before you failed this trial, they were not harmed, they were dismissed, returned to their worlds with gifts and warnings." "And me?" Elias asked. "You stayed," she said. "You did not choose the path that protects you." Elias shrugged lightly. "Humans aren't very good at choosing the safe path." "That is becoming clear," she replied. She leaned back, folding her long fingers together. "The Conquered was built on a single belief," she said. "That stability comes from distance. Rulers must be elevated. Emotions must be controlled. Connection creates weakness." Elias listened closely. "For centuries, we believed this made us strong," she continued. "We believed that removing the personal would prevent chaos, that if I stood above all others, the Conquered would remain united." Her gaze sharpened. "And yet, here we are, fractures forming, rebellions whispering, allies growing cautious." "Because no one feels seen," Elias said quietly. The queen's eyes flicked to him. "You speak as if you understand," she said. "I understand enough," he replied. "Humans tried the same thing once, empires built on distance. Leaders raised so high they couldn't hear the people anymore." "And what happened to those empires?" she asked. "They fell," Elias said simply. "Not always in fire, sometimes they just stopped meaning anything." Silence returned, but this time it felt thoughtful. Queen Salith stood and walked toward the window again. Beyond it, a massive fleet drifted in perfect formation, silent and precise. "I was chosen young," she said. "Trained to rule before I understood what ruling meant. I was taught that empathy was dangerous. That affection was indulgence. That attachment would make me weak." She turned slightly enough that Elias could see her profile. "I believed them. I still do sometimes." Elias rose slowly, careful not to startle her. He stopped a respectful distance away. "Being afraid doesn't make you weak," he said. "It makes you honest." She looked at him fully now. "You are not afraid of me," she said. Elias considered the question. "I am," he said honestly. "But I'm more afraid of what happens if no one ever tells you the truth." The queen studied him as if seeing a new shape to reality. "You were not selected because you are exceptional," she said. Elias raised an eyebrow. "That's comforting." She ignored the comment. "You were selected because you are average, you are representative." The Conquered wanted to see if humans would bend when placed near power. "And did we?" Elias asked. Her gaze held his. "You did not." A soft tone sounded in the room. The lights shifted. "The court is restless," she said. "They sense imbalance. They do not know why." Elias felt a tightening in his chest. "What happens now?" The queen turned away from the window. "Now," she said, "they will test you again." Elias frowned. "I thought the trial was over." "The formal trial," she corrected. "Yes, but the real one has just begun." She moved closer, her voice lowering. "They will watch your every action, every word. They will attempt to provoke you into error. They want proof that choosing connection was a mistake." "And you?" Elias asked. "I must appear to allow it," she said. If I protect you openly, they will see you as a tool. If I distance myself, they will see you as expendable. Elias let out a slow breath. So I walk a line. Yes, she said. So do I. There was a pause. Something unspoken hung between them. Finally, Elias asked, Why tell me this? Queen Saleth's expression shifted again just slightly. Because if you are to stand beside me, she said, you deserve to know the truth, even if it endangers me. That admission carried more weight than any threat. Elias nodded. Then I'll do the same. She studied him. What truth will you endanger yourself with, human? That I won't play their game, he said. I won't pretend to be less human to make them comfortable, and I won't pretend you are untouchable. The room seemed to hold its breath. Queen Saleth did not react immediately. When she did, it was with a slow, deliberate nod. Good, she said. Then let them watch. The days that followed were a careful dance. Elias was brought into public spaces alongside the queen, but never too close. He attended councils where nobles debated borders and fleets as if he were not present, then abruptly demanded his opinion to see how he would react. Some tried to bait him with praise, calling humanity promising, in the same tone one might use for a useful animal. Others tested him with subtle insults, questioning Earth's stability, its short history, its emotional nature. Elias answered calmly. He did not argue unless necessary. He did not bow excessively, nor did he challenge authority openly. He spoke when he had something real to say. And when he didn't, he stayed silent. That unsettled them more than anger ever could. Queen Saleth watched from her throne, her expression unreadable. To the court, she appeared distant, evaluating him like any other political asset. But Elias noticed the small signs. How her gaze lingered when he spoke honestly. How her posture eased slightly when he refused to play power games. Whispers spread. Some nobles began to call him the mirror, quietly, not as praise, but as accusation. Others warned that he was corrupting the queen, drawing her closer to dangerous ideas. One evening, as Elias walked through a garden chamber filled with bioluminescent plants, an Aurelian noble approached him alone. Tall, severe, eyes sharp behind a silver mask. You misunderstand your position, the noble said. Elias stopped. Enlighten me. You exist because the queen allows it, the noble replied. Do not mistake her curiosity for protection. Elias met the noble's gaze. I don't, he said. But neither should you mistake control for strength. The noble's eyes narrowed. You think you are changing her. I think she's already changing, Elias said. I'm just not pretending not to see it. The noble stepped closer, voice low. Careful, human. Empires do not thank those who show them their flaws. Elias smiled faintly. Human history suggests they don't survive ignoring them either. The noble left without another word. That night, Elias stood once more at a window, looking out into the ordered beauty of the conquered. He felt the weight of being watched, judged, measured. Behind him, a familiar presence approached. Queen Saleth stopped beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. She did not look at him at first. They are afraid, she said quietly. Elias nodded. So are you? Yes, she admitted, but for the first time not alone. They stood in silence, watching ships drift like stars on rails. Elias understood then that part 2 of the trial was not about proving humanity's worth. It was about whether an empire built on distance could survive its ruler learning to be seen, and whether a human, standing in the center of alien power, could remain human without being broken. The real danger was no longer failure, it was success. Because if the queen truly changed, the conquered would never be the same again. And neither would Earth. The first sign of danger came without warning. Elias was attending a public council session when the lights in the chamber dimmed for half a second, so brief that most beings would not have noticed. Humans noticed patterns. Elias felt it like a skipped heartbeat. Queen Saleth sat on her throne, listening as nobles debated trade routes near the outer systems. Their voices were calm, polite, and carefully sharpened. Nothing sounded wrong, but Elias felt it anyway. He leaned slightly toward the translator at his collar and spoke quietly. Something off? The device did not respond. It never did unless addressed directly, but the queen's eyes flicked toward him. Just for an instant, that was enough. The lights stabilized, the debate continued, but the air had changed. It felt tighter, like a room where too many secrets were being held at once. Later that cycle, Elias learned what the flicker meant. He was walking back to his chamber when the corridor sealed itself behind him. The smooth walls shimmered, and a low hum filled the air. Elias stopped, his instincts flaring. Hello, he called, no answer. The lights shifted again, forming symbols along the walls, Aurelian script, sharp and formal. The translator activated. By authority of the inner conquered, it read, you are summoned for private evaluation. Ilias' jaw tightened. I wasn't informed. This evaluation does not require your consent, the system replied. Of course it didn't. The floor beneath his feet moved, not physically, but spatially. The corridor unfolded, bending into a new path that led downward. Ilias had no choice but to walk. He entered a chamber he had never seen before. It was smaller than the council hall, but colder. The walls were dark metal instead of living stone. 3 figures waited inside, all wearing the masks of high authority. Their posture told Ilias everything he needed to know. These were not diplomats. These proceedings are unofficial, one of them said, and therefore more honest. Ilias folded his arms loosely. That's usually not a good sign. You have influenced the queen, another said. I spoke to her, Ilias replied. That's not influence, that's conversation. A low sound came from behind one of the masks, not laughter, disapproval. Your presence has destabilized established order, the first voice continued. Her Majesty hesitates. She questions long-standing doctrine. Ilias nodded slowly. Good. That word hit the room like a thrown object. You forget yourself, the third voice said sharply. You are not here to reshape the conquered. I know, Ilias said calmly. I'm here to represent humanity honestly. Humanity is irrelevant, the voice snapped. The conquered endures, individuals do not matter. Ilias felt a familiar anger rise, but he kept his voice level. Then why are you so afraid of one human? Silence followed. Then the first voice spoke again, slower now. You misunderstand. This is not fear, this is correction. The air behind Ilias shifted. He turned just as energy bands snapped around his arms and torso, holding him in place. They did not hurt, but they locked his muscles instantly. Ilias exhaled sharply. So this is how the conquered handles disagreement. This is how it prevents decay, the voice replied. You will be given a choice. Ilias almost laughed, almost. A different choice, he asked, or the same one with better lighting, the figure ignored the comment. You will publicly renounce your informal bond with the queen. You will accept a ceremonial role only, limited access, controlled speech. And if I do, you will be returned to Earth, the voice said. Alive, disgraced, your alliance weakened. Ilias' mind raced. Being sent home would protect him, but it would confirm everything the conquered believed, that humans could be neutralized, reduced, controlled. And it would leave Queen Salith alone again, surrounded by those who wanted her distant and silent. And if I agree? Ilias asked. You remain, the voice said, but the queen returns to what she was. Ilias closed his eyes for a moment. He saw the image from the trial again. The queen alone in a room with no doors. He opened his eyes. No, he said. The energy bands tightened slightly, reacting to his resistance. No, the voice repeated. I won't do it, Ilias said. You're not protecting the conquered, you're protecting yourselves. A sharp sound cut through the chamber. You will not speak to us of courage, the third voice said. You are temporary. Ilias met the direction of the voice squarely. So is your control. The lights flared. Before anyone could react, the chamber doors opened. Queen Salith stepped inside. The authority figures froze. She wore her crown again, the shards spinning slowly, dangerously. Her posture was rigid, controlled, but her eyes were burning. Release him, she said. This matter is internal, one voice said quickly. You are not. Release him, she repeated. The energy bands vanished. Ilias staggered slightly, then steadied himself. He did not move away from the queen. You overstep, another voice warned. Queen Salith's gaze swept across them like a blade. You summoned my consort without my knowledge. You restrained him. You offered him ultimatums. She stepped forward. You forget who defines order. The chamber shook slightly as her authority pressed into the systems around them. One of the figures bowed stiffly. We act for the conquered's survival. So do I, the queen replied. The difference is that I remember what survival is for. The silence that followed was heavy and final. Leave, she commanded. One by one, the figures withdrew. The doors sealed behind them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Queen Salith turned to Ilias. Her control cracked. Are you harmed? She asked. Ilias shook his head. No, just annoyed. That earned a short, sharp exhale from her, something dangerously close to a laugh, then her expression darkened. They should not have done that. They were always going to try, Ilias said. This was never just about me, she nodded slowly. They believe I am changing too much. You are, Elias said. That scares them. She looked away. It scares me. They left the chamber together. Word spread fast. By the next cycle, the palace was filled with tension. Factions formed openly now. Some nobles defended the queen's authority, others whispered about tradition and stability. The conquered's perfect calm was cracking. Then came the external crisis. A border system went dark. No warning, no signals, just silence. Scouts reported debris fields where stations had been, ships damaged by unknown weapons, refugees fleeing toward conquered space. An alien power long held at bay had chosen this moment to strike. The council erupted into panic and argument. Mobilize the fleets. No, fortify the core. This is provocation. Queen Salith listened, silent, then she stood. The room quieted instantly. We will not retreat, she said, nor will we rush blindly into war. Eyes turned to her, shocked. We will respond with coordination, she continued, and with allies, a noble scoffed. Allies, you mean the humans? Yes, she said calmly. The chamber exploded into protest. They are untested, they are emotional, they are weak. Elias felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on him. Queen Salith raised her hand. The humans have fought extinction more than once, she said. They adapt, they endure, and they do not abandon those they choose to stand with. She turned slightly toward Elias. I will not lead this conquered as a solitary symbol anymore, she said. I will lead it as a ruler who trusts. The words sent shockwaves through the chamber. This was it, the turning point. Elias stepped forward before anyone could stop him. He did not raise his voice. You don't have to trust us blindly, he said. But if you push us away now, you will face this threat alone. Humans don't promise perfection, we promise effort. A noble snarled. And what do you demand in return? Elias met their gaze. Nothing you aren't willing to give. Honesty, cooperation, and the chance to fight for something bigger than fear. The chamber fell silent. Queen Salith looked at him, not as a queen evaluating a tool, but as a person standing beside another person. In that moment, the conquered saw something it had never allowed before. A ruler who was not alone, a human who did not kneel, and a future that could no longer be controlled by distance and silence. The decision was made. The conquered would stand with Earth. As the fleets prepared, Elias understood the truth. The greatest threat was not the enemy at the border. It was the idea that power must stand apart from connection. And that idea was finally losing. Whatever came next, there was no going back. The mirror had shattered. And the reflection had changed everything. The battle did not become a legend because of fire or destruction. It became a legend because of what followed. The joint fleets of the conquered and Earth moved together for the first time, not in perfect Aurelian formation and not in chaotic human style, but in something new. Human ships adjusted on instinct. Aurelian ships adapted their patterns in real time. Where one side would have failed alone, together they held. The enemy was pushed back, surprised not by superior force, but by cooperation they did not expect. When the fighting ended, the border systems were reclaimed. Survivors were rescued. The conquered had won, but not in the way it was used to winning. Elias stood on an observation platform as ships returned home. His body was tired in a way that reached the bones, but his mind felt clear. Queen Salith stood beside him. This time she did not wear her crown. News of that alone spread faster than any battle report. The court gathered days later, not in the grand hall of judgment, but in a wider chamber designed for record and memory. This was where truths were made permanent. The nobles waited, tense and uncertain. Queen Salith stepped forward. For centuries, she said, the conquered believed distance was strength, that rulers must stand above, unseen and untouched. She paused. That belief protected us, and it imprisoned us. Murmurs spread, but no one interrupted. I was trained to be flawless, she continued, to rule without connection, to never allow myself to be truly known. Her eyes moved across the room. That nearly destroyed us. The silence was complete now. She turned slightly and gestured toward Elias. This human did not conquer us, he did not command us, he did not flatter us. Elias felt every eye on him. He stood beside me, the queen said, and he refused to let me forget that I am not a symbol, I am a being. Some nobles lowered their heads, others watched, conflicted. The conquered will change, Queen Salith said, not because humans demand it, but because survival demands it. She lifted a small device and placed it on the floor before the throne, her crown. I will still rule, she said calmly, but I will not rule alone. The sound that followed was not applause. Aurelians did not do that. It was acceptance. Slow, careful, real. Later, when the court had dispersed, Elias stood once more at the same window where everything had begun. The conquered still looked beautiful, but now he could see movement where once there had only been order. Queen Salith joined him. "You changed history," she said. Elias shook his head. "No, you did." She considered that. "Then you changed me." Elias smiled faintly. "We do that sometimes." She studied him, then nodded. "What will Earth say?" she asked. "They'll argue," Elias said. "They'll worry, but they'll stay. Humans don't walk away after choosing a side." The queen looked out at the stars. "Neither will the conquered." They stood in silence, not as ruler and consort, but as two beings who had seen each other clearly and chosen not to turn away. The galaxy would remember this moment differently than it remembered wars. It would remember the day an empire learned that strength did not come from standing alone, and the day humanity proved that its greatest power was not force, but the courage to care, even when surrounded by the stars.